All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Frizzell, and I'm the General Manager here at AeroPM. I'd firstly like to thank all of you for dialing into AeroPM's latest edition of Learning Together. I'm personally very excited to hear from two of AeroPM and Defence's foremost experts on cooperative programs. And for those of you who are dialing in for their first Learning Together program with us, I'd like to thank you for your time. And for those who are repeat viewers, thank you for coming back. So here at AeroPM, we are very big on sharing our knowledge across industry, and our Learning Together programs are a fantastic way to achieve this outcome. If you do want to look back at previous presentations, then please jump onto our YouTube station, aptly titled AeroPM Live. So now I'm going to hand over to our first presenter, Brett Weinman, to begin the presentation on International Cooperative Program Value Propositions. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And yeah, thanks everyone for dialing in. Um, yeah, just a quick overview. I'm just going to do a quick intro for cooperative programs before I get into the topic of sort of the value proposition or business case, let's say, for a cooperative program. So both Kate and I will present today, and I won't go through the details here, but I guess the red there is all the programs we've been on that are cooperative. So it's just a little bit of our background where we've been across a few programs, so have some insight into the nuances of them. Slide, please. Yep, slide again, please. So yeah, I was just going to spend a couple of moments going through a bit of the strategic environment. So I guess most people on the line will be aware that we've got a long relationship with the US government, and FMS procurement is a large volume of our acquisition and sustainment portfolio across defence. But I guess more recently, we are shifting towards cooperative programs in a number of areas, and that's driven by sort of the strategic environment. Slide, please. So next few slides are really just some snippets from the publicly facing strategic guidance that the NDS 24 that came out has cooperative, co-development, co-sustainment, co-production throughout it, particularly with a focus on the US, but also other allied nations. Slide, please. That same narrative was through the Defence Industry Development Strategy and also AUKUS narratives, both in the NDS and other documents. So, you know, really from the government down, there is a real intent to get after cooperation across the capability life cycle. So that's where I guess these sort of programs are driven, and it is very consistent with government's direction. Slide, please. This is just one example. If you just go back one, please, Frizz. Yeah, probably 18 months ago now, an OSMIN joint statement. So this was a statement between the US government and Australia with very intentful language to get after certain cooperative programs. PRISM's mentioned there, as well as GMLARs, so a couple of weapons programs. And if you go slide, yeah, within sort of a year, we'd signed a couple of new memorandums of understanding to get after both of those. So it's not just Australia's strategic intent, but the US has also got a high motivation to get after these in a collaborative way. Slide, please. All right, so what is an ICP? I have international there in brackets. International Cooperative Program is, I guess, the US nomenclature, mainly because all of their US programs that a partner joins is international from their perspective. ICP or CP, common terminology, I guess, on the Australian side for the way we talk about it. In general, it'll be any acquisition or technology project where we're participating with the US, and it could be just bilateral with us and the US or multiple nations, and it would be to jointly develop, produce, sustain, or enhance a capability. So it could be all of or elements of that life cycle, depending on the nature of that arrangement. So that definition's there from Defence Acquisition University. So that's the US's you know, the way they frame a cooperative program. They're typically, well, not typically, always enabled through an international arrangement. It is typically a memorandum of understanding or a project arrangement. So those terms may be familiar with some. In general, those instruments are, I guess, at least official sensitive, so not publicly available. There are some older ones available online to get a feel for what they might look like. But in general, they have the objective scope, financial provisions, and other enabling provisions that underpin the practical execution. So that's generally what a cooperative program is. Think of it as the instrument in lieu of a FMS case LOA that's defining your scope of what you're procuring. It's the framework that will do cooperation under. There are also, I guess, from a US perspective, armaments cooperation enabling programs. They're things like reciprocal use of test facilities, program exchange personnel. They're sort of broader arrangements that aren't specific to, let's say, a particular weapons system or technology. They're more, government to government arrangements across the board. So they're sort of outside the scope of a cooperative program, but still exist there. Slide. So this is just a summary, I guess, of some system level. So I use that term in that a whole of weapons system or whole of major system cooperative program. There's plenty of media and articles about all of these programs. I'm not going to go into them in much detail, but it's just an indication that there are quite a few of them. People might not be aware of all of them, and this is also just a snapshot of the major ones that are probably applicable to those that are dialing in or of interest. Off note, I mentioned before, cooperation might be across the life cycle. So there are production sustainment and follow-on development MOUs. There are development sustainment MOUs. There are some that are just for engineering, manufacturing, development. So it's all contextualized around the phase of the product life cycle or our capability life cycle and what the objectives are. So each one's different, but the overall structure of it is common. Slide, please. So just a very high level comparison of FMS and cooperative programs. I've taken this from Defence Acquisition University. I won't delve into too much of the detail, but in general, line for line there. So flexible, you have the flexibility to work with that program office as opposed to a rigid LOA, LOR structure. There can be multiple participants. You're a partner as opposed to a customer, and working jointly with them on requirements and user operational aspects. So there are quite a few differences with being in a partnership as opposed to that buyer-seller relationship. What I will say is that whilst I'm talking about the value proposition of cooperatives, that doesn't mean that FMS is not an appropriate acquisition strategy for defence material. It all needs to be contextualised. So there's plenty of FMS cases that are still extant and major acquisitions like C-130, lots of weapons programs, Black Hawks and Apache that are all FMS, contemporary FMS cases. So it all depends on the intent, the objectives as to which acquisition strategy you might take with a US facing procurement. Slide, please. All right, so that was a relatively quick intro just to set the scene of where co-ops fit into our environment. So the value proposition, I've got a few slides here just going through some of the tenets of that value for money or business case. And the reason I guess this is important is that we are used to FMS, I guess, across the environment, and quite often all of the benefits of a cooperative aren't well understood. Whether that's internal to defence or across industry. So it's a strategic level. I guess there's clear strengthening of the relationship as opposed to being a customer. So we are, working collaboratively with the US government. We are informing requirements together. It goes to actually working as global fleets together, which I'll talk to later on. What I would say is that, there's a lot of I guess, transformational change on the US side at the moment with a number of executive orders that are coming out. Brett's view of that, I'm certainly not a defence view, is that whilst a lot of those executive orders are inwards facing at the US industrial base, I think Australia cooperating and investing in that development is also, I guess, mutually benefit for both nations. Operational, stronger global fleets. So we are in fact, recognised as another squadron or another unit of a global cooperative fleet. So when you talk about product support, AOG priorities, wholesale spares demands, that is all part of now a global fleet. So we can pull, for example, a part from a US base that we need as a priority, and it can work that way. So overall, that stronger global fleet and operational readiness across the partners. Governance and influence. So we do get membership in bodies within the cooperative program, predominantly a steering committee. So it allows us to have influence on requirements and priorities. It's to the benefit of all partners. So some there is a discrete vote, others it is more about influence, but we are a party to those. So it does give us some insight as opposed to receiving, the specification at the back end of an FMS procurement. The integration with US program management forums, I'll talk to a bit later in project management. So I'll gloss over that for the moment. Slide, please. So these are just a few examples when I spoke about requirements prioritization. That first slide there, the search and rescue kit for the P8A, search and rescue was a requirement for Australia. It wasn't for the US. They had the Coast Guard for that. It was an Australian unique requirement to develop and incorporate and do the T&E for a search and rescue kit. We provide the T&E expertise, how to fly those sorts of sorties, and certified that and cleared it. What had happened was that the US Navy was the first to operationally employ that search and rescue kit, and it's now a common requirement. So we lent in on that and were able to prioritize and shape that. Tanking again, US Navy doesn't traditionally do boom refueling. We do. We also had an earlier need to do the clearance, so we sent a KC-30 and our T&E folk, and were able to support that earlier than what the Navy was planning for. Slide, please. And digital MAD for the Romeo, again, an Australian unique requirement. We were able to push that forward in the flight plan. We were able to be flexible with our funding, and it is now a developed modification for that fleet. So, yeah, just a few. There's small examples, but some tangible, evidence of, it's not just a party line that we get to influence requirements and prioritize things. Slide, please. So economic, I think shared research development, test and evaluation, shared production and sustainment, common costs. So it's really about economies of scale across that life cycle. I'll talk about later in the challenges is that shared RDT&E is also a challenge in my mind for Australia, in that we're not typically used to the cost of development of products. We are generally a consumer or a procurer of existing technology, at least in the delivery groups. And financial flexibility. So again, between the US and Australian budget cycles, there is an ability to work at a reasonably tactical level on trying to manage those respective budgets. We've got different financial years, different appropriation processes. So it does give us some flexibility, but on the other side of that requires active management. So, it's a two-sided, a two-edged sword, but it does give us flexibility. Technology and capability, maximize configuration commonality really is about, not necessarily the FMS variant. So in general, we would be going after the same configuration as the US operates. I would say, in fairness, that's not 100% the case, but it's definitely, far from the FMS variant that often is available to foreign customers. We have greater insight into what that configuration is, what those capabilities are, and allows us to be more interoperable and erring on interchangeable with the US. and early access to technology, which I'll talk about in a moment. So if we go slide, please. So this slide's from DAU again, but I guess for those familiar with the US acquisition life cycle, they have got two major pathways. One's middle tier acquisition on the top, and the bottom one's their major capability acquisition, which is akin to our gate one, gate two process. A cooperative program we can enter much earlier in the life cycle, as opposed to an FMS case where, in general, that capability needs to be operationally cleared by the US themselves, and that's generally through at a milestone C decision for their full rate production. So it's a proven technology, whereas in cooperative, we can start earlier, we can be involved in the development phase, we can get into potentially low rate initial production contracts. So it's early access, insight, influence and requirements, which is one of the benefits. Slide, please. So project and product management. So I guess with a cooperative, we are in the tent, we are working hand in hand with the US program office as opposed to the FMS centralized services. So we get integrated project execution, we get exposure to complex projects and programs, and access to the US project management and technical governance processes. So what does that mean? Access to project management reviews with US industry, with the US primes, insight into the systems engineering technical review life cycle of the US government. And all of that helps inform our own program or project. It informs our planning for project approvals. It informs our project performance for execution. So we're more informed with all of those aspects. I spoke about early access to production and modifications. So again, getting into rapid fielding, LRIP contracts, and also upgrades. So, if we're developing an upgrade cooperatively, we will get access to mod kits in similar timeframes to the US. So all of it's about speed to capability in that regard. Flexible and phase scope. Sorry, mate. The flexibility is that you are not bound to a LOR, LOA process. We can work more tactically on modifying scope, moving things left and right in terms of delivery schedules, all within the US commercial confines, but definitely a lot more flexible as we work through challenges together. Slide, please. So cooperative program personnel, you would have or may have heard the term CPP. So they are in the tent, as I like to say. They're not a technical liaison officer. So these folk are a contribution to the program, and they sit within the US program office. They are on base within the unit. They can be Australian facing as part of a cooperative program office, or they could be, in fact, working in US billets. So effectively having a command chain through the US program office. So compare that to a TLO, they're generally off base. They are located in the US, but at arm's length from that implementing program office. An important part of that is, that cultural and bureaucratic barriers. A big part of cooperative programs is relationships and trust, and working through those challenges together where there might be rubs between different policies and regulations. And that is a real benefit to have Australians embedded there, and we culturally evolve together. Science and technology, T&E and industry, I've sort of grouped these together. Whilst it's a US program in general, there are increasing opportunities, I guess, for science and technology and T&E and industry participation. We're more doing now collaborative or joint S&T plans, where there may well be a joint S&T program, and we will allocate tasks between DST and AFRL or NRL as examples. So instead of having two S&T programs and trying to bring the best together, we are doing that as a team. Um, T&E as well. Historically it's been more about OT&E, the KC-30 and the SAR kit examples before. But again, increasingly looking at DT contributions as well to a program. So personnel and expertise, assets and range access. Those are things that now we are able to actively contribute, not just from a capacity on the US side, but from a capability that Australia brings to the table. Opportunity to connect Australian industry with US primes. So Kate will talk to this a bit more with the JSF example, so I won't jump into that. But also an increasing push for, I'll say, regional sustainment. So MRO and U for the cooperative fleet, not just Australia's fleet in the Pacific region, obviously becoming more strategically significant. Slide. So these are just a few examples of those tenants. So on the left there, Prism Increment 4 flight testing plan in Australia. So that's, some T&E contribution. Allied Fleets sustainment. So that's a P8 and Triton intent to do MRO and regional sustainment here. Slide. And then some NGJ, next generation jammer. So electronic attack, joint logistics aspects. There's also some other planned weapons testing in Australia that's all been announced with intent, which is all goodness for Australian industry, Australian T&E, Australian S&T, enabled through a cooperative program. Slide, please. Alrighty, so that's all the goodness. I shouldn't say this is badness, but these are the challenges. So, there's a lot of benefits to it, but that's balanced with some of the challenges that need to be worked through. And upfront investment's a big one, as we do share equitably. So that's not equal, it's equitable, common and non-recurring costs. So the value for money, I guess, sometimes is difficult to see when there's a lot of upfront investment that doesn't equal an aircraft or an asset at the end of it. And it's typically not what Australian Defence is used to. So, some contemporary examples that aren't cooperatives. There's recent announcements on MQ-28 and Ghost Shark. The value of that announcement relative to the quantity of assets. It would seem like the asset itself is expensive, but that's because there's a significant development investment ahead of that. So it's a challenge to put that business case together to get the early access to technology commensurate with the dollars investment. Increased governance. So working within the US government, within that program office, you need to be working very closely with them. So that's having a cooperative or joint program office, working with those additional governance forums that you'll have. But it also requires a detailed understanding of US government policy and regulation for both budget cycles, contracting, their acquisition and sustainment regulations, so we can best inform ourselves as we work with the US. So I think there's a big investment in learning that also comes with it. Slide, please. Shared program risk. So again, the FMS example, we would generally get the technology or access to it after the US has proven it and operationally released it. So a lot of that technical and program risk has been retired. It is a program of record with the US already. With cooperatives, depending on where we join them, we will get that early access to the high-end technology. However, we are still potentially in areas of a program where there's program risk or technical risk to be retired, and we're exposed to that as well. So, the extra insight into the data we get helps inform that risk, absolutely. But again, we need to understand the US environment to best articulate the implications for us. So an example, Nunn-McCurdy breach is that's akin to program of interest, program of what's the other term? Program of concern. It's a similar sort of thing to that. And then things like budget cycles and NDAAs, which could have significant budget implications for the US. And the technical risk, I think, is quite self-evident if you're doing early development and prototyping. Slide, please. So culture, yeah, I guess this is a bit of personal opinion, I guess. Yeah, quite policy driven. I guess the way I'd phrase it is, if a policy doesn't say you can do it, quite often the answer is we can't do it. So it's just trying to break down those barriers, particularly when there's a limited policy framework around how to implement a cooperative program, and changing that sort of mindset of partners, not end customers. So I think that's an ongoing activity over the life of a cooperative program, just to avoid any defaults to FMS sort of behaviours or mindsets. And it all comes with trusted relationships and thinking about the outcome. What's the North Star that we're all working towards? Commercial and finance. The bottom line up front there is our systems aren't the same, and they don't align well. So there's an incongruence between both financial regulations and policy and budget cycles. And it's just working between those. There are opportunities to make that work for us, but it does need active management. Foreign disclosure and export, it's not necessarily a cooperative program issue. It's all of US technology issue. However, I guess getting involved earlier, some of those international acquisition and export or tech security and foreign disclosure aspects have not been built into the program from the start. So sometimes there's a retrospective assessment needed, and that can create challenges with disclosure and exportability. So that's the reality, but it's just something to be mindful of. There's also some significant export reform going on that's related to cooperative programs. That's very fresh. Some of those final rules in the NDAA 26 had some Arms Export Control Act reform as well. In the US enterprise size, whilst you work with that US program office, there are a plethora of enabling officers that will execute a program, and those cooperative behaviours diminish as soon as you leave your parent project office. So it's just that continuing championing of the cooperative intent, the relationship, the trust, but it can be challenging the further you go away from that program office that you're collaborating with. Slide, please. Look, that's just a bit of a summary of those benefits and challenges. My PowerPoint skills aren't the greatest, but that's just a quick look at what I've covered just then. So that's broadly the high level benefits and challenges. I guess from my perspective and from my experience, having been involved in trying to establish cooperatives, so how to get them up and running versus in addition to that execution and delivery of a capability. So I'll wrap up there and hand over to Kate to talk about industry.
Okay, so a slide, please. So as you can see, I'm going to run through Australian industry participation from a JSF perspective. I'm going to keep it pretty high level, like Brett, unofficial info. There's a lot to go through, as you can imagine. It's quite a big program, so I won't get through every aspect of industry for JSF. But if you have any questions, you can call me at any time. Slide, please. Sorry to say that. So the JSF program for Australia has had two government mandates. So the first one being to deliver the new air combat capability to meet Australia's air combat needs. And then the second was to deliver a strong industry base that supported the global fleet and provide Australia with long-term economic benefit. interesting point to these two mandates. The first one was funded, so government provided funding for the delivery of the jets and supporting equipment, etc. But there was no funding, avenue for the industry side of it. So keep that in mind throughout. Slide, please. So just a quick overview of the F-35 JSF program for those that aren't completely across it. So Australia joined the Cooperative program in 2002 under the System Development and Demonstration MOU, so the SDD MOU. This is where a lot of relationship building began, with an aim to identify, pursue and win opportunities for Australian industry within the design and production. From there, it moved over to the production sustainment and follow-on development MOU. So that was established in 2006 with all the partner nations with a 52-year life. And a lot of the industry from that SDD phase moved over and transitioned over into low-rate initial production phase and then follow-on full-rate production. I guess the key part to this was that early entry into the F-35 program. So, we were there from the SDD phase. We got some of our industry in that phase, and that made a real difference being in that tent at the start. Slide, please. So just a quick, what the program looks like. So 20 countries in the program so far. 8 of those being participants to the PSFD MOU, so the people in the tent, so to say. And then right now there are 12 FMS customers with more to come. So basically that PSFD MOU that you can see on the right there, within that, support to industrial participation is on a best value basis. There is no offset program for the participants to the MOU. It is purely best value competitive. What is of note is that some FMS customers build in offsets into their FMS cases. Slide, please. So how Australia dealt with the IP industrial participation program. So back in 2006, when we signed up to the PSFD MOU, the Australian government also signed 2 MOUs with the 2 primes, being Lockheed Martin and Pratt & Whitney. So they are specifically MOUs for Australian industrial participation. Basically, it provides good faith efforts between government and the primes to provide industry with best value or opportunities for them to pursue. Under that, we talk to them monthly, so we have meetings monthly with Pratt and Lockheed IPP team. They deliver us twice yearly reporting updates, so a mid and an end year update that outlines the opportunities that are available or captured or closed out to 2045, and then current contract values. Yeah, so how we kind of go about it at a really high level. The first one being dedicated defence project resources. So a lot of what happens with Australian industry wouldn't have happened without the resourcing that defence provided from the onset. So there has always been a dedicated F-35 industry team in Australia throughout the project. I guess the team, what it sat there doing was, doing capability scans of industry, understanding what their capabilities are, where the gaps are, where uplift is required. And then, moving as we go through the production and into, sustaining, understanding what the warfighter needs for Australia, and then what the enterprise needs, understanding top degraders, that type of thing is what is required. And then the team also helps Australian industry decipher how the US do business, because it is very different to contracting with Australian DoD. As well as that, so industry promotion. So part of it all as well was getting out there and promoting industry. So with, throughout, we've gone to all the exhibitions and we bring the primes over to visit industry and really promote them to get them either get them looked at for production, which is still ongoing for many years, and then sustainment as well. A big part of for industry, especially for SMEs, was Australia lobbying for exemption to ITAR bid and proposal exemption. So that meant that I guess industry could have early exchange with the primes with tech data and F-35 information without having to go through the TAA process first, because that was a significant hurdle for Australian industry. So we kind of got that exemption in place so that they could have those early conversations before going through with a full TAA. When it came to funding, so there are a JSF, a specific grant was put in place to provide support to Australian industry. And then there was also, we also have some direct contracts with some suppliers, like for air vehicle MRO and the engine MRO that we have. They're regional capabilities that get aircraft, that will get aircraft and engines for the Asia Pacific region. So we provided direct contracts for the significant investment of facilities and equipment upgrades and stuff for those depots. Slide. So I'll talk about briefly about the grant program. So it was, it's called the JSF Joint Strike Fighter Industry Support Program. So it's the grant that was put in place to support industry with two streams or two opportunities. The first being for production. So the production opportunities supported industry with a 50-50 split of funding to acquire or upgrade their equipment and capabilities. So that meant Defence would obviously fund 50% of the total project, and with the company having to foot the other 50%. And then there is a sustainment opportunity. So this is for direct support to our regional component MRO, so onshoring that MRO within Australia for Australian fleet as well as the Asia Pacific region. So the Australian industry team that I'm a part of lobbied throughout the program and still do to gain assignments for those component depots. And then I guess the JSF ISP sustainment opportunity helps with the significant capital costs in standing up those facilities. Understanding US contracting rules, I mean, they don't allow for recoupment in a lot of these types of costs, so the grant helps Australian industry to fund those to ensure they keep their costs down and remain competitive. Next slide. Okay, to date, so currently, or as of mid 2025, current industry opportunities are 13.32 billion. So that's what out to 2045, what Australian industry could contract, and to mid last year, Australian industry have contracted $5.2 billion worth of work. That's not year-end 2025 figures because they haven't been released by Defence. Next slide. This is just, I guess, a snapshot of a handful of our 75 plus suppliers and what they do. These are kind of I guess I took snippets from their banners from the Avalon Air Show. I've taken out company names, sorry, because it's a bit of a funny environment for anyone supplying to F-35 at the moment. But as you can see, we've got companies that are, you know, sole suppliers, OEMs of an engine trailer, machining parts, sustaining aircraft. Yeah, there's so much Australian industry involved in producing and maintaining the F-35. Next slide. Industry challenges. So there are a lot of challenges within this program. So, you know, maintaining realistic aspirations and expectations for industry is challenging because qualifying as a manufacturer or a repair source for F-35 can take a really long time, anywhere from 2 to 5 years at a minimum. So that can be really challenging for a company, for revenue, etc. Works only on a competitive basis, best value, as I said before. So you're competing against every other nation trying to get a good industry outcome as well. So, and as I mentioned, those FMSs that have offsets included in their LOAs. So, that can be challenging. High initial capital investment and low cash flow. So, the equipment and things that are required, especially for component repair and MRO, is quite high, and then the layout of money in the short term is low. So they got to find efficiencies really quickly in their processes. So we kind of help them with that as well, but it's challenging. Increased labour rates. Obviously, Australia, we pay really well here compared to a lot of other countries, and it costs a lot to import the materials and stuff that we need. So that is another significant challenge for industry. And then the US government regs and everything, it obviously is its own beast as well. A few lessons that have been learned over time, just a couple of high ones here that kind of pinpoint what I've already spoken about. So industry competitiveness, companies really have to find those efficiencies to maintain their cost competitiveness. So they will usually be allowed to start out with a higher repair price, for example, or a higher sell price, but they will be made to, get that learning curve down really quickly to pull that price down to maintain it with current incumbents or other depots. Foreign exchange rate is a big one as well. Once our companies are in contract, they will usually contract directly with the primes. They're locked in, so if there's huge fluctuations in exchange rates, that can really hurt them, depending on their business model, etc. And then we've got funding. So as I said before, funding's a big one. The team back before I was there had to lobby really hard, and we still have to lobby really hard to find and secure funding to help industry. So making sure, if it's important to if you've got a major project it's important to have Australian industry involved, you need to have funding to do that, or find a way to fund that from the beginning. Next slide. And then again, a key one, capital investment and supplier qual. So, company business models and ownerships and everything play into how they want to do it. But yeah, it is really, costly and time consuming to qualify for manufacture or repair. Slide. Lastly, just to summarize the success elements for JSF in relation to industry participation was that early participation. As I mentioned, we were there from the design phase. We were in the tent and are still in the tent. So we, tend to try and be the loudest so that we can help our industry. So yeah, being in early is a big part of that. And then that strong and consistent support. So we are, constantly talking with the primes. We are out there with our industry, helping them understand what it is they should be doing, shouldn't be doing. And then that grant support funding. So just making sure you've got something in place or some kind of strategy that is hopefully funded to help industry. And that's me.
All right. Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you, Kate. And just thank you both for sharing your knowledge and experiences from your cooperative program journeys. Emily and I are very proud of the work that you both do every day. So thank you very much. I first met Brett in the acquisition phase of the P8 program, which was my first introduction to cooperative programs. But I just wasn't aware just how many cooperative programs we were involved in up until now. The roots definitely run deep across our capabilities. So thank you, Brett, for sharing your presentation. And Kate, I also think you have one of the best jobs in not only consulting, but across defence. And I suppose you never know, there may be an MRO online who might want to jump into your supply chain to fill some of those gaps along the way.
Yeah.
But I would like to thank you both for your presentations, and I'd like to open the floor for any questions. If you do have a question, just jump off the mute and just ask away.
Hi there, team. My name's Nick. I'm the category advisor for the Air Force Logistics Officer workforce. Obviously, quite a decent proportion of the log officer workforce in Air Force exists within CASG, and we're quite heavily invested in the F-35 program in particular, as well as a number of programs. I guess from your perspective on the outside looking in, so to speak, do you have any observations, I guess, about um, the transient nature of military workforce as they move through these programs? Do you see any sort of challenges or any sort of observations that you've seen from, I guess, the fact that, we can only commit that uniform member for 2 or 3 years to a program that runs for quite a long period of time? We're talking, decades worth of a program. Yeah, we're only sending humans for sort of 2 or 3 years. Do you have some any observations, I guess, from your perspective as someone who doesn't post the way that we do?
You
Uh,
go first, Brett.
yeah, yeah. Are you referring to more like the cooperative program folk that we send over, or just in general?
Well, a bit of both. I guess the sales pitch that we have internally is that we invest very heavily in those overseas postings, and that gets us good return on investment in terms of having bigger sway in a program which we numerically have a smaller number of jets in. And then I guess more generally back here in Australia in terms of us moving people through SPOs for sort of 2 or 3 years at a time.
Yep, yep. So I guess in the SPO or general posting cycle, I guess so I've been APS and in the defense environment for a while. I think just in general that posting cycle for major programs, particularly at critical phases, is a challenge regardless of acquisition type. Um, and I don't think that's a surprising comment to anyone. But from a CPP perspective, yeah, I think yeah, my experience is that as we integrate with the US logistics system, and I'm not a loggy, each service does it differently. And I do think there's an opportunity to get better with each service's logistic uh, workflows. So for everything we're doing at NavAir, can we consolidate our knowledge and consolidate those folk that are in NavAir and NavSup as an example? So, if we're able to do that, I think then, you know, people that we're posting over are going into more of a running system, so to say, as opposed to just a discrete project office. I don't know if I'm framing that correctly, but I think that's an opportunity. Whether that's executable, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of what's the word? Like it's been a real recognition of late that a lot of our CPPs will go over and then have their 2 or 3 years in a JPO and then come back and be posted off somewhere else, and you kind of really lose that excellent corporate knowledge. So it's from what I'm hearing, they're definitely doing a lot of work on that. We've had a national deputy come home recently, and he's being embedded in the project for another at least year to keep that corporate knowledge and to transfer that across. So I think they're slowly realizing that, it's a more bang for buck if you keep them within the project for a little bit as they come out. But then, being on the side of seeing postings go in and out with the project and what that's like, I think it's great, especially within the projects, to have those people an ADF have those fresh set of eyes and come in, and then you've usually got specialists like ourselves who are there to maintain that consistency and to help out, and then you get the fresh eyes in as required.
Awesome. All right, thanks so much. It's really relevant to our work at the moment as the transition from CASG to delivery agency kicks off. Air Force is quite seriously looking at how many what proportions of our workforce we leave in the material logistics or capability logistics world. So Yeah, it's good to get your perspective on that because we have our views on what the value is, but it's good to get your view as well as we start to review how many people we leave in CASG. Thank you, appreciate it.
I feel like as well, sorry, I'm just going to add on to that. It's my personal opinion, I will say. Logistics is a big one that I think we very much need to maintain some ADF within the acquisition areas because, the way that we do logistics is so specialized in defense. And so bringing in, even APS and stuff, it doesn't usually have the knowledge and experience that's required. So I think it's always a need for ADF logistics to be in acquisition organizations.
I think, Kate, just the as well the ongoing posting cycle of military personnel, having been in there myself, you might go in and be a CPP member posted to Pax River, and then on promotion a few years later you might come back to be the CEO of the P8 program office here in Australia, the SPO. So you're bringing with you a lot of inherent knowledge from your acquisition phase or maybe another posting you've had in a cooperative program. And yeah, that is quite valuable down the track as well, not just in the immediate term.
No, I totally agree. Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Nick, for your question. Do we have any other questions from anybody? All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I'd like to again thank both Brett and Kate for their fantastic presentations. From here, we'll upload this presentation to the AeroPM YouTube station for anyone who would like to review it or share it with some of their co-workers at a later date. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for dialing in, and please stay tuned for our next iteration of the Learning Together program that will come out shortly. Thank you again.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thanks,
Frizz.
Rob.
Thanks.